Inaka. So stick around.
Right.
We will be right back. All
I can
right. Hi,
share links
everyone.
too if you got any.
Maybe we'll try that. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Today we are talking about abandoned houses in Japan and how to fill them with people who want to live there.
And the
Akiya is
love.
a really big issue in Japan. In the Seeking Sustainability Live series, we've had quite a few people who have remodeled their houses to live in or for their businesses. So this is definitely a topic we want to talk more about. It's great to talk to you, Matt. You're starting a new venture. Thanks so much for
Yep.
joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I want to dive in a little bit before we talk about Akiya Inaka, a little bit
Hmm.
about your disaster relief volunteering that you did. You were living in Tohoku, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. In Miyako City in Iwate, which is, I believe, their claim to fame is the easternmost point of Japan or some on the mainland or something. That was always a talking point that to me it left me somewhat underwhelmed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was up there from I think it was November 14th, 2009 to was it May 15th, I think,
And
2011.
you were a jet up there, is that right?
I was almost a jet. I got waitlisted and I was very impatient, so I went with another company that paid less. But yeah, I was teaching up there.
And then the disaster happened and you said you were helping organize volunteers and then working with galleries and art projects to help the
Yeah,
disaster
yeah,
area.
yeah.
That's
So
great.
I'm not even sure if volunteer is the correct word because like I lived there. So
Mm-hmm.
what the hell else am I gonna do? You know? But yeah, it was me and I think it was eight or so other friends. For the first 3 days, I was stuck on a hilltop Buddhist temple, which was very fitting for a natural disaster. And then for the next like month and a half or so, I was living out of my friend Seiji's house, and his family is kind of like the family of Miyako. And so eight or so of us were living there, and pretty much every day, we had our shovels and pickaxes and stuff, and basically just wandered the city helping people out. Which was we moved a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
it
Well,
was it
it's
was pretty rough though. So
yeah, it must have been. And it's great that you were able to help out. We've had a few people in the series recently talking about Tohoku. I think now, as we're coming up to the 10-year anniversary of the disaster, definitely it's a time to remember what happened and how things have progressed, but still what the situation is in terms of needs for the community, right?
right, it's still pretty dire. One of the issues that I've had over the years with art galleries and various NPOs and stuff dealing with Tohoku is again kind of, and we'll probably touch on this a good bit more in depth in a minute, but there's a narrative issue around Tohoku, and it's frequently treated uh, kind of pathetically is always the sort of feeling that I get of like, oh, they got hit by a tsunami. That's so sad. It's like, no, there's a lot more strength up there. And so one thing that I've always wanted to do is kind of, re-navigate, reapproach how to talk about Tohoku and what Tohoku is. Which is an ongoing conversation. It's not like I have, the definitive uh, kind of things to say about it. But it's a great spot that I think Akiya, for one, can ultimately help kind of lift up.
Definitely. We had Jess Helms last week talking about Tohoku travel and how
Hmm.
she's working with a local travel agency trying to rebrand the area and not
Yep.
only have the image of Fukushima and the disaster, but have all these other narratives, like you say, all these other great stories, because it's a big area. And there
It's huge.
must be lots of great Akiya there. So let's transition into the Akiya talk.
Yeah, right on. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Um,
So tell me how you got started with Akiya and Inaka.
well, I mean, officially we've only been at it for 3 or 4 months, right? But this is actually kind of a weird story. So I've got significant background in organizing, specifically in Japan's extreme metal music underground. And there's a whole lot of data involved in wrangling that ecosystem. I'm a musician, I perform, I book, I do all of these things. And so years ago, I developed a platform that kind of collates specific sets of data regarding live music. So that's concerts that themselves, that's the venues, that's, this, that, and the other thing. And so basically, I ended up getting kind of predictive analytics about extreme metal in Japan, which is a super neat story to talk about another day. However, that methodology, strangely enough, is actually very, very applicable to what's going on with Akiya. So for the past 7 or so years, I've been dealing in data collation, scraping, cleaning, and things like that. But only over the last year and a half or so have I been applying that to the Akiya market. And really, what happened there is, like most people, I think it was 2015 when these articles started coming out about, oh my God, free houses in Japan, go get them or whatever, which was very suspicious and clickbaity from Go. And in reading those articles, though, and seeing them frequently pop up, and they're always kind of citing the same numbers, but there's no reference, no actual citation, which to me is just very suspicious. So I kind of took it upon myself to try to dig into the numbers and see exactly what's going on, and ended up being successful at it.
Great.
Right.
So I'm showing right now, I'm showing your Facebook page. You guys are on Facebook, Akiya Inaka, all one word. You're also on Instagram, same Akiya Inaka. You're on Twitter. And then you have your website as well, which is probably the main hub for everything, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. LinkedIn's doing quite well, actually. It's strange how much I have the distaste that I have for LinkedIn is not at all in line with how effective it's been at onboarding clients. So
Well, they need more people who love death metal on LinkedIn, I think. They need more
yeah, they do.
diversity on there.
Yeah, yeah. Get all the grindcore businessmen and women.
So on the about page, it talks
Yeah,
about the kind of services you guys offer is research, acclimatization, and
acclimatization.
oh, okay, yeah, I was reading that weird,
I gotcha.
and brokerage.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce those three parts a little
Yeah,
bit?
sure. So actually, the way that all this started was specifically around the data thing, right? Like, I'm not a licensed real estate agent, and so I can't sell stuff. But the original concept was, well, it's hard enough for kind of your average person to do due diligence and basically just dig for information about Akiya, such that nobody even talks about it. Like they don't bother pursuing anything because they can't even get the first step out the door. And so my original hypothesis anyway was you can just monetize that as a service, and if they want to buy something, they can go to the real estate agent, right? But then we ended up, me and my business partner Parker ended up working with a real estate agency as well as a judicial scrivener called STK Properties. And so what started as merely just a research process, we can actually now take people from research to actually walkthroughs, establishing us as buyers reps, and then through the brokerage, and actually beyond that too. Like, we have a expanding network of various craftspeople, gardeners or wallpaper specialists or whatever, in case anybody, wants to fix up a fixer-upper.
Yeah, and you guys both have language skills as well as you understand the local areas, you understand the Inaka. So this is all very important when you're choosing areas to relocate and
Oh yeah,
properties, and you've seen
yeah.
it, right?
'Cause
So, but the which is the biggest hurdle for people? Is it the language part? Is it the paperwork? Like what
no,
when people are
s-
looking?
so it's generally it's a super bureaucratic process, but that doesn't mean it's difficult. It's just kind of dumb and boring and not exciting. The language thing is an issue for all people. You know, your average Japanese person, I'm pretty damn sure won't understand the Japanese deed that it's getting over. And so anybody kind of needs translation with that. I said the biggest problem right now is scope, in that there's everything out there. Like you can really let your imagination run wild and probably be able to pursue it if you determine that. And so just finding out what it is you actually want tends to be a kind of a stopping block, or at least a tripping point for a lot of potential clients. And so really just onboarding them with, oh, okay, here's the idea, this is what you want, is itself can be kind of, what's the right word, not frustrating, but you know, that can be a limiting factor for sure.
Yeah. And in on your YouTube channel, which I haven't mentioned
Mm.
yet, Akiya Hunter, you're introducing a lot of the Akiya that you're doing due diligence, you're doing the paperwork to get permission to go and see
Yes.
it.
Oh,
Can
you
you
actually
tell us?
watched that one?
Oh, well, I skimmed through, but I got the
No
gist.
kidding. Okay.
Can you tell us a bit about that process? Because you can't just go and see them without
Well,
applying,
and
right?
here's the thing, that there's a lot of things that I want to communicate, but one of those is that this is a dynamic process. Okay, it's not cut and dry. It's not black and white. It's not binary. It's complex. It's an ecosystem that is not a national one, right? Each municipality handles all things Akiya related in an idiosyncratic manner, right? So if you think that the way, I don't know, what, like Nagara out in Chiba operates is going to be the same as Sagamihara, you got another thing coming, right? And so part of the research process and the due diligence is not just about the house itself, but rather the environment that it occurs in, because we're dealing with ecosystems, right? And so that's really one of the kind of what more difficult elements of all of this. And so, and you might be disappointed as well. You might say, okay, I want this, 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 this. We go out, we find it, we deliver it. And then you realize, oh, actually, you know what? I don't like that. What about over here? Right. And so it's an iterative process as well, or it can be. I'd say right now with our clients, generally, we kind of hit the nail on the head within the somewhere between 3 and 6 property listings. We end up finding something that they determine is in line with their parameters and expectations, and then we can move to closing proceedings for it. But yeah.
Yeah. So when people contact you, are you dealing mostly with people in Tokyo looking to start the process to telecommute since they're working online anyway? Is this a
So it's,
Corona inspired venture?
oh, hell
Kind
yeah.
of. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Corona is terrible in a whole lot of ways, but not for business, at least for us right now. Yeah, it's so, let's see, from the start, it was 100% Tokyo people generally looking for, well, and two, you got to consider that for a long time, this narrative has been out there that, you know, there's these houses, but they're all dilapidated and they're super cheap, but then you're going to have to spend 100 million yen on them and like all of this stuff, which sometimes is true, but oftentimes is also not. And so people right now are clients, they're not immediately saying, okay, I'm going to move to Inaka. Let's do this. I'm going to get a big house and everything like that, right? What they're doing is they're kind of tiptoeing, thinking about a weekend house. Usually it's going to be around 2 hours or less away from the city. It's not going to be that big. And so we're kind of at phase one right now, or maybe even phase zero, where our clients are kind of, again, acclimatizing themselves to the idea that this sort of thing is even possible, right? So a lot of Tokyo. We actually have international clients. We were on a call this morning with one in Seattle. We've also got somebody in Denmark that we're working with. They generally are looking more southerly. Shikoku is kind of hot right now, as is Fukuoka, where I am in the Izu Peninsula, is quite popular. Tochigi, Chiba, to a little, and we actually got one inquiry recently about Iwate. But yeah, we've got quite the international cast of characters that we have on that we're working with.
Yeah, that's exciting. And a lot of the properties you were showing in the video, I know there's probably a whole host of properties you haven't put on the website and you haven't put on the videos.
You should see
But
my
I
cat.
was, yeah, it's like that, right? But I was really interested in how many of the properties you were showing are kind of already fixed up, and the people in the show were saying it was fixed up for Airbnb or it was fixed up for a second home, a beso.
Yep.
Is that, and then of course you could move in to those kind of places or have it as a second home. Um,
Mhm.
so that you do have some properties that people could kind of buy and move in pretty quickly, right?
Oh, yeah, the vast majority of the properties that we've already sold are turnkey. One we sold recently up in Nagano, I think we closed on a Thursday, and they went up there for the weekend and spent the weekend at the place. And so this is the really cool part about the narrative of Akiya, right? Is that the general understanding for years has been they're pieces of junk, they're free, but you have to spend a whole bunch of money on them to fix them. You can't do anything. Why would you ever do that? It's not in Tokyo, right? And the fact is, sometimes that's true, but a lot of the times it's not. Like, look, there, you can buy it and then move in on the weekend like that, and it's got gigabit internet connection and things like that. In fact, some of our clients, they have better internet service out in the sticks than they do downtown.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah. I did an interview with the Fridales, who have this beautiful 150-year-old house in the middle of
Hmm.
nowhere, and they've remodeled, and their internet connection was better than when I talk to people in Tokyo sometimes. It's
Right.
crazy.
Right.
Melissa Mills had joined from YouTube. Thanks, Melissa. She says, I want to live there. she's
Yeah.
a she's a sake expert in Australia. So I hope you can find your dream Akiya and move over, Melissa.
Yeah. Get in
Yeah.
touch.
Can you tell us a bit about your business model? So, you guys are working kind of as an intermediary, helping people find places. How does it work for you guys in terms of who pays you? How do you get paid?
Right.
What's your business model?
So we're basically a real estate consultancy. Right. And so, kind of step one is just determining parameters. Then it's desktop research, right? And so each property that we produce for any of our clients, we charge 30,000 yen per property, just to basically create a portfolio, right? Because we're not stuck working with one portfolio. We literally can cover case the entire nation. So if anybody can find it, it's probably us. Second is that acclimatization thing, which is walkthroughs, establishing us as buyers reps, negotiation tactics. We commission property surveys, things like that, and so that's 100,000 yen per day. And then step three, through brokerage, we basically charge a 2% commission fee on the sale price, which is in addition to what the 3% cut that the real estate agent takes. So, like, yeah, you are paying more money than you would if you did it yourself. However, the kind of the peace of mind, transparency, and assistance that we are able to provide our clients is basically not available anywhere else. And the scary
Yeah.
thing is, a lot of people who have done this, like I said, they had the contract and they had no idea what the hell it was saying. They just kind of just signed, right? Which is a relatively dangerous way to conduct business, right?
Yeah.
That being said, if we had we commissioned a property survey, and it turned out that the property we had surveyed was actually a historic reservation, and this wasn't listed in the documentation, right? But there's building codes that go with that. That's an important piece of information to have that they didn't have, and because of that, we are actually able to use that as leverage to negotiate the price down by 500,000 yen.
Wow, great.
So that's the other kind of stuff that we can do.
Yeah, I know in our situation we bought an old 50-year-old house, which sounds really young compared to a
Mhm.
lot of the Akiya that people buy and renovate. But we were really happy with it, the old style, like old farmhouse style.
Right,
And
right,
we negotiated the price. They basically gave us a discount because of the house, that they thought you're
right.
just
Yeah,
buying
they'll
the
do that. They'll do
land.
that.
The house is gomi, it's garbage. So we're going to give you a discount because you're keeping the house that normally we would just knock down, right?
Right, exactly. That happens too. It's weird.
And we're like, no, we like it.
And
We're going to keep it. And
yeah, and
the
I mean
person
that's
helping was
really
like, no, shh, don't say that. Don't say, just say yes. Yeah, it's garbage,
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. But I mean that's the thing too, is like we're not marketing these aren't like the Ritz in they're not necessarily like luxury estates, but they're totally functional and usable. And another thing too, that like kind of linguistically, Akiya is a weird word because it's actually specifically vacant, not abandoned, vacant
Right.
house, right? And so you got two things you got to work with there, right? Number one is that Aki translation of, well, is it vacant or is it abandoned? Those two have kind of different emotional impacts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of the time, these abandoned houses, right, they're still owned, they're still maintained, they still like the owners have all the documentation and stuff like that. Frequently, it's just that they're 87 and now they can't drive, so how do they get out to the house? They want to get rid of it,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right?
In fact, a
Um,
lot of the really abandoned ones you can't even find out how to buy because there's a problem with finding the owner, or that's kind
yeah,
of the government's working on that a little bit too, right?
right.
We have
So
a
that
comment from Jessup. Jessup says, love this interview, but just wish Matt was doing it live from a flowing stream in the countryside.
next time,
Thanks,
I know the
Jessup.
stream he's talking about.
Monderu has joined from YouTube. Thanks for joining. He said, I've always been interested in Akiya. Do you guys provide services all around Japan or just in specific areas? Good question.
Yeah, we work with wherever you want to work, right? So yeah, we're all across Japan. That being said, like we can't guarantee that we'll find the thing where you want it to be, but yeah, we work all across Japan. Be happy to talk more.
Yeah, great. Get in touch. Sorry, I cut you off. You were mid talking about something, finding
Oh,
the ones which are really
yeah. So
abandoned.
there's the Akiya vacant, abandoned sort of thing. I prefer vacant. I think that sounds a lot better, and it's a more accurate translation too, right? Something needs to be abandoned by someone, right? Something can just be vacant by itself, right?
But
But then
when
there's
people
also
talk about in Japan, when people talk about the Akiya problem, they're talking
mhm.
about the ones that are abandoned, that they
They're
can't,
talking about the garbage ones.
but
Yeah,
also the ones that they would like to renovate, but they can't seem to find the owner, right?
right, right. And then there's the ya part of Akiya, which is specifically house uchi, right? And the fact is, there's a lot of houses out there. There's also a lot of office space. There's bowling alleys. There's restaurants. There like any type of building you can think of. There's probably a vacant one somewhere out there. I really like the idea of getting a bowling alley myself.
Oh, wouldn't
There's
that be
those are up in
great?
Tochigi.
Yeah. I mean, we visited a restaurant. I don't know if they're still in business in Hiroshima. They took over a giant warehouse to make a really cool restaurant. In Onomichi in Hiroshima, they took over the whole port warehouse system, made a beautiful, cool
Wow.
hotel and shops and restaurants inside. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
In the countryside of Hiroshima, there's a bakery cafe called Oheso Belly Button,
Okay.
and
Yeah. It's a
he's him and his wife had taken over an old farmhouse for the cafe, and then they wanted a bakery separate. They took over an old convenience store and made a bakery, and then took over the next door gas station, which was abandoned. So all of these
yeah. Yeah.
were abandoned Akiya, and they're making use of it. So you can really
Exactly.
make good use and make money off of these kind of derelict buildings, right?
Right. And that's that narrative issue, right? Is the generally accepted understanding of what Akiya are is not in line with the reality, right? That narrative says that they're bad, don't get them, they're a waste of time and money, just don't even think about it. But the fact is, if you bother intelligently, right? Dealing with these things. That's just nascent infrastructure for whatever you have planned, right?
Right. Yeah. Can you give us a bit of a scope about pricing? I mean, Kamakura, for example, you're talking Kamakura, the beautiful houses in Kamakura that you're
Mm.
showing are surely a lot more expensive than like some in Ibaraki, for example,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're talking very different grades, but
Yeah,
general
it's the
ballpark, like about how much are you finding?
I'd say right now, I would say my understanding, this is a very general statement, so there's absolutely exceptions to what I'm about to say. But I'd say if you have between like 5 and 10 million yen, you'll probably be able to uncover something pretty good. That being said, there was this super awesome hilltop, like, walled in kind of getaway cabin place in Chiba that was listed for 80 man, like 800,000 yen. And again, that's the building and the land, right? It's not,
Yeah.
so for $8,000, like, that's pretty good. Of course, this place wasn't, palatial and expansive. It was a cabin in the woods, right? But you can find gigantic mansions, you can find tiny little cabins, and the price just goes all over the place,
Yeah.
right?
Are
Right
you, I
now,
mean,
we've got one of our clients, budget wise, maxes out at about 75 million yen, which you can certainly go and you'll get 7,000 square meters of land and ryokan and stuff with that kind of money. But yeah, you can go as high or kind of as low as you like.
yeah,
But yeah,
it's
that being said, between 5 and 10 mil seems to be like a decent kind of place to start.
mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then for renovations, I mean, some of them look they're already renovated. Um, for us, we were really lucky to get kind of near the city, not too far out the
Yeah,
city, but it was abandoned. It wasn't in use for 10 years.
right, right.
So
I mean,
even
I'm in an Akiya right now.
not far from the city, right? You can still find these great deals sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. The one that I currently live in sold for 2.7 million yen, right? Which is nothing. Um,
That's really $27,000.
yeah, it's
Is
like
it?
25,000 dollars, something like that,
Wow.
maybe. And it's a 3 store ex-corporate retreat. I'm overlooking the ocean and the mountains of Atami.
Oh
Like,
my
that's pretty cool.
gosh. Wow, that is crazy cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it's a service to the community. It's not just making a good deal on somewhere to stay. You're really doing a service for Japan by repopulating the communities in the rural areas, right? Like
And
I
really
love
kind
the
of,
stories. Like you visited the Nagis, right? And I
yeah,
that's how I found you was researching for their talk and how they're having their kids out there and they're repopulating the schools and the neighborhoods and they're there so they're helping the community, right? And
yeah, yeah.
the
So I mean, there's we sort of think of ourselves not so much as, I mean, yeah, it's real estate that we deal with, but kind of the effect of those real estate transactions is much more a quality of life sort of service, right? And that's another thing too. And it really, on a personal level, strikes me as very odd how frequently like cold hard cash comes up in conversations about real estate. It's like people for the last 5 years haven't even, like, that's all they think about when they think about real estate. It's like, geez, guys, you can go have a nice barbecue. Like, isn't that on the weekends? Like, wouldn't you pay for that? You already pay for that when you go on vacation. Why not just buy? Like, why does it have to be a 5%, ROI or whatever? And so that's another thing that we're actively kind of working with, is again creating kind of that alternative narrative about how much cheaper, how much more healthy, how simpler, how all of the benefits that come with living out of a major city center, right? And I mean, even for myself, like I said, I'm in Atami. I'm still 90 minutes from Tokyo, right? Right now, I'm choosing not to go because there's a huge spike in corona cases, but normally I'm there like 3 times a week or something, right? And so it's not like by not living in Tokyo, I can't do stuff in Tokyo. Like, that's a ridiculous. I don't know why people think that,
yeah,
but they do.
yeah, that's true. And it's like Byron Nagy was saying, it's like a shift in your priorities. and you
Yeah.
start to question, like people like, oh, don't you miss Tokyo? Don't you miss being near all the restaurants and stuff? And they said they were going back like every weekend at first, and then now they're like, we haven't been to Tokyo all year. Like
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
priorities shift. Like, do you really want to anymore? Like, you start to enjoy the country life a bit. It's
Yeah, I
wonderful to
mean,
hear.
don't get me wrong, Tokyo is a whole bunch of fun. But importantly, though, especially for myself, as somebody who, like I mentioned, does a lot of work in the independent music scene, one of the major reasons, if not the major reason, to be in Tokyo is for all of the live houses, like the music venues, right? So that's basically not a reason anymore because most of them are shut down, right? Even when they are hosting events, it's a max cap between 30 and 50. It's kind of spooky and like a weird feeling, kind of a weird vibe. So, like, there's no real reason to live in Tokyo. Like, I'm still doing business, I'm doing successful business. Costs are down, profits are up. I'm probably healthier. I'm certainly getting a whole lot more fresh air. Oh, and I'm not surrounded by millions of people during a global pandemic. So that's nice.
Yeah. It seems like you should be in the back of your mind always looking for a giant outdoor venue to have
So
all your
actually,
music stuff
interestingly
that
enough,
you're
yeah.
connected to, right?
So actually, we're already doing that. There's a spot. You should actually talk to this guy. His name is Scout. He runs the Earth Hostel Riverside up in Nico. I can send you a link later.
Yeah, please
Um,
do.
and, and so he bought an Akiya like 10 years ago. It's this huge, kind of like where I live, an abandoned corporate retreat right next to this big river. There's actually a video of me swimming in the river on the YouTube channel. So that's the place.
I didn't get to watch
But
all the videos yet. I'll be back.
yeah, yeah. But so he picked it up like 10 years ago, actually with the intent of making it into kind of a mini outdoor festival spot. But, business
Cool.
and life happens and he kind of never got around to it. But I've been going up there discussing with him what kind of options we have for hosting concerts there, and he's open to it. So we've actually already carded. Let me back up for a second. There's also one of the venues that we raised money for using the Zyko platform. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's called El Puente out in Yokohama. And so the thing with them is it's cool that Scout says we can host a concert there. He doesn't have any equipment. So, like, where do we get equipment? And then out in Yokohama, the place called El Puente, which is a very important venue in kind of the extreme metal and grindcore scene. They've got a lot of gear and they don't have much concerts, right? And so we've actually been trucking amps and soundboards and PAs and stuff up to the Akiya and Nico with the intent of hopefully doing something in like April. But that's like, be careful
Yeah.
of this conversation. I could go on and on and on and on
Well,
about it.
in terms of the future of tourism, outdoor concerts, outdoor experiences, that's the way to go. We have a great comment from Jessup here. Is the government providing any incentives now to buy Akiya to live or work in because of the whole teleworking movement? Or are there any special tax write offs for an Akiya versus buying a new home? Good
Yeah,
question.
there's three sort of initiatives out there, but it all depends on where. Like, for example, Yuga Wada is not part of it. There's one that you can get up to 1 million yen for individuals that have relocated out of the city and into kind of identified districts. There's another one that you can get up to 2 million yen if you establish a business in Inaka. And then there's one that's been floating around. I don't know too much about it, but it sounds like you can get up to $9,000 for relocating out of the city. I need to follow up on that one. But there does appear to be some money floating around. I have yet to hear any success stories about it, though. So that's something that we should probably look into more.
Yeah, I don't know if it's active yet, but there was something in the newspaper that had passed through the government to get people keep their Tokyo jobs to relocate out to the Inaka, and they would get 1 million yen. And
Right.
then the government would also invest in the Inaka areas to improve the infrastructure in terms of internet cables and stuff like that. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. And that's really the
Great.
crux of it. If you don't have an internet connection, okay, then Inaka might not be the place to be. If you have an internet connection, you're fine. Most people can conduct business with that, right? Like,
Yeah.
stop kidding yourself. Like, that's honestly like the frustrating part about all of this is it's like, geez, guys, if you just had a little bit of imagination, you'd realize that this is totally awesome and doable, and there's no reason why you shouldn't consider it. But there's
Yeah.
this very kind of I've come to refer to it as an ideology of like the metro ideology. And if you're
Yeah.
not in a metro area, then you're in garbage and you're not worthy and stuff. It's like, nah, dude. Like, if you just do it right,
Well,
you can reap a whole lot of benefits.
yeah, it's all about priorities. Like when you're
Mhm.
living in the city, you're thinking, "Oh, I really can't live without this
Right.
part of my life." And then if you do, even for a weekend, go out to the countryside, you might reevaluate and be like, "Actually, I prioritize clean air and water and being next to an organic farm. Oh, that's kind of better value than what I was valuing before,
Yeah.
right?"
And so actually this is something we didn't expect at first to be as big an issue as it is, but it is actually a relatively large issue. And so something that we're spinning up right now. We've had two test runs. Jessup was actually at one for something we're calling Inaka Club, which is basically like micro, probably maximum of 8 or so people, and just like weekend excursions exploring. We can go fishing in Atami, or we can go visit Byron up in Sagamihara and work on the farm, or we've got all these connections that we can leverage that really just go to show, hey everybody, if you step out of the city, like, you're not going to die necessarily. There are bears, you need to be careful of them, but yeah, it's odd how strongly held and adhered to this metro ideology kind of is, and only because of that, there's all these opportunities that are just getting completely overlooked and missed.
Yeah, for
Right. I mean,
sure.
the fact is, you can do better business, right, by not living in the city center, which is a crazy thing to say because for the last few centuries anyway, it's been the cities the where to be. But fact is, we've got 30 years of internet now. Like, I'm pretty sure that thing works. Like, just use that. It's fine.
Yeah. The Vox, Asia, was it Vox? No,
Vice,
Asia
vice.
Vice video with the Nagys and him introducing the country area to another couple living in the city.
Right,
And
right,
then I guess he was in Kanagawa, so he was doing an hour and a half by train
right.
commute anyway. And if he moved out to the countryside, it wouldn't actually be that different of a commute from
Right.
living kind of in the city but outside the city. And it's crazy. Like when you think about it, you got to think about what works for you and your
Well,
family, of course.
yeah. Well, and the family thing is a very good point to bring up, right? Because education. And it is still the case, I would say, that Tokyo is a pretty good spot to get better education in Japan, right? That being said, there are spots with decent, like Sagamihara, where the
Yeah.
Nagys are. It's not Montessori, it's the other one. But there's a really high profile, very liberal, very artsy, very kind of high minded spot. I'd send my kids absolutely out there. So it's also not the case that if you're in Inaka, you're gonna not be educated. Like, it's also possible to do that.
Well, it's all the standard. If you're talking about public schools, my kids went
Hmm.
through public school until junior high, and
Hmm.
it's all the same schooling system. It's all the same teachers. They get rotated all over the place,
Right.
and you are helping keep that school open by putting your kids there. And if it's a smaller class, your kid gets more personalized attention. Which, if
This is
it's a
what
good
happened to
teacher,
me when I was
this
in
is a good
college.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I most of my college career was spent in independent study, one on one with history and philosophy professors. It's awesome. It's a really good way to learn.
That's cool.
Right. I'm all
Uh,
for that.
David has joined us from YouTube saying, I'm just tuning in. Sorry if this was already addressed earlier. Do you have any experience with reselling an Akiya? I know a few people who are interested but are concerned about the resale value. Keep up the good
Yeah,
work. I'll be listening to the whole episode. Thanks, David.
yeah. We definitely work with that. We've basically our on our website, the Akiya listings. That's basically what we're doing there. And so we just need to speak with the owner and see what the circumstances are surrounding their specific house or property.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's totally doable.
I mean, my husband always likes to say that we would never be able to resell our house because it's too westernized. What we've
Hmm.
done to a traditional house is make it more comfortable for us. But maybe
Right.
a Japanese buyer wouldn't be interested in that. But I think for sure another Western buyer would be interested. Like
Oh,
we've
that's
made higher doorways and that kind of
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So that's actually that at least brings up in my head a good point, which is a few days ago there was, I think it was Japan Times, but some publication had ran a headline of, and again it was relatively sensationalistic itself, but it was like, the foreign population is the one that's moving out to the Akiya and the Inaka and stuff. And from like anecdotal evidence, right, in my experience, what we see happening is, well, no, it tends to be the foreign populations are the ones who are buying Akiya in Inaka with the intent of moving there. However, there's a lot of domestic Japanese who are also buying Akiya in Inaka with the intent of making a telework space. It's a business opportunity, right? And so that's right now kind of one of the big differences that we see in kind of who's operating in the Akiya space is, are you doing it as a business or as a lifestyle?
Yeah. And some of the places that you showed, they're already renting it out, like as it will now because of coronavirus. They're not, but they were renting it out as Airbnb or a second home, using it for like a retreat.
Right, right.
So people might have been buying it and renovating it with that in mind. And then during coronavirus, it's getting a bit hard because there's nobody really moving around in the tourism industry, so they might be thinking of selling, right?
Right, right, right.
Jessup says, "Thank God this internet thing works so I can listen and watch today. 30 years proven technology."
Yeah, exactly.
Hashtag.
Right. The internet's pretty cool, guys.
It's really cool. Yeah. So technically, how did you learn about how to find places? Like how long did it take you to get over the hurdle of how to find the best places to make the effort to go out and see? Because it's a big
Yeah,
effort, right? To do all the
it
paperwork,
is.
to go and see it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, it depends on the district that you're working with. Like, for example, with Nagara out in Chiba, you have to basically provide handwritten application for specific properties, not just like a general on license to Akiya kind of thing. Which is, I mean, I'll call it what it is. It's a pain in the ass. It sucks. Like the fact that they do that is certainly hindering their ability to sell these spots, right? That being said, if like when I was just up in Minakami for one of the houses that we listed up there, those things, everybody's just like, hey, come on in, right? And so it's not particularly difficult to do anything. That's kind of the on the ground stuff. The kind of intel wise, I mean, anybody can really kind of do the desktop research, right? It's just, again, it's a pain in the ass, and it'll take you a few hours, if not a few days. If you're successful, it's not guaranteed that you will be. But the kind of the state of affairs of property management from a municipal level is just, I mean, kind of astoundingly awful. And they vary in levels of awfulness, but I don't think I've yet found one that is anything more than awful. And so that's kind of where it is. That being said, there's sort of kind of either three or four ways that we have access to information. Obviously, there's the Akiya banks, which are the municipal run real estate listings. There's the actual real estate agents, right? Their public facing website. Because we have a partnership with a real estate agent, we also have access to the national MLS system called Rains, which we're able to parse and dig through. We also, one of the reasons that I moved to Yugawara is that I knew that the Izu region was very, very attractive to a lot of people right now, and really wanted to build, number one, build our networks down here, because there's a lot of stuff that just isn't listed, right? And that may or may not be intentional. But frequently, if you've got, like many things in Japan and kind of just the world, but if you've got that network connection, right, frequently you're given access to quite a bit more info than kind of your average person would get.
Yeah. Do you find that some people who you've dealt with in terms of the Akiya, they would put you on to other people that they know
Oh yeah,
who have Akiya?
absolutely.
It's all
Yes.
connections.
Yep. Yeah.
I could
There's
imagine that.
it's wacky. It's like this hidden world because there's a lot of people and a lot of Akiya. It's just nobody unless you know, you don't know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, once
Have
I mean
you?
that's part of the fun of all this too is I mean it is once you can't unsee it, right? Once you determine like figure out how to access all of this stuff, half the fun is just chasing after this stuff. I'm like it's like a dog in what tires or
Yeah.
something like that. I'm just the hunt is half the fun, right?
Yeah. I could imagine like if somebody said they wanted to live on an island and like this many hours away from a city or something. I could
So
imagine just going to an area that I know would have Akiya and just wandering around, taking down addresses and then going and asking like are they actually Akiya? Like there must be a lot that just aren't listed yet, right?
yeah, yeah. And in fact, I'll be going to an island next week. We just got contacted by a person who runs a hotel out on Oshima Island, which is in the Izu Peninsula. And so I'll be heading out there for another episode of Akiya Hunter to be in. And I didn't even really like Oshima. I don't think I've ever thought about that place. So when he contacted us, it was kind of like, oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
So
island life. I grew up in Hawaii, so that appeals to me, but
yeah, yeah.
it has to have conveniences as well. I can't grow my own food effectively. I'm a horrible gardener. I need to be near someone's good farm.
Right, right. Well, and that again, that's the thing too, right? That's the case for a lot of people. And if that is the case, okay, fine, we can work with that. Right? A lot of the time the thought, the narrative around Akiya is that, oh no, there is no convenience anywhere. It's the frontier. I'm just like, no, damn it.
You
Like
still have
if you
people
want the
out there. Yeah, yeah, just not so many. I
yeah.
noticed you also have a trailer home that you talk about on the website. The Tono Trailer Home Trial. What was that?
Ah, yes, yes, yes. So it's actually interesting. My business partner and I, Parker, we both have very strong ties to Iwate Prefecture. Me with Miyako, but then he, with Tono City, he's actually responsible for setting up the sister city relationship between his hometown of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Tono. And so he's the one to ask about that.
Okay.
I only know so much about that story.
And then it's also repurposing ryokan. So sometimes you'll have a akiya, which is a ryokan. Is that right?
Oh, I mean, especially like where I am in Atami, it's lousy with ryokan everywhere. And they're also very interested in exploring like music concert possibilities right now. But yeah, there's a guy here in Yugawara named Chris. He's, I believe, a Hong Kong national. But he has successfully, kind of all over the world, bought up, I guess, traditionally warehouses, like factory warehouses, and converted them into kind of art installation spaces. And so that's what he's doing down here in Yugawara, but with a ryokan and not with a warehouse.
And you've got a few listings in Kamakura, which is such a beautiful area, not far from the temples. The house that you showed in the video, it's kind of private because you've got your own
Yes.
small garden. A little bit hard maybe to get up to on like rock steps or something, but just a gorgeous area. How much do those
Mm-hmm.
go for in Kamakura?
Kamakura is expensive.
Yeah.
That one that you're talking about is 49.8 mil yen, not US. So let's call it, half a million US,
Half a
something like
million
that.
US dollars, yeah. But it was quite spacious, like quite a few rooms and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say it's an 8 LDK. So and the coolest thing about that's, yeah, again, like with the hunt of Akiya, right? You always uncover these wacky stories and stuff. And so with that particular property, it's cool because the owners are professional photographers and there's an actual dark room in that house. Of course, you could just repurpose it as a closet if you want, but there's a dark room, which is super cool.
Wow. That
So you
is
can have
really
acid
cool.
baths and everything, chemical baths and acid washes and everything. Yeah, that one's quite nice. The one out in Nagara that's also listed, I think that's 18.7 million. That one was charming. Nagata is a very, it's tough to get out there. And here's another wacky thing, right? So I'm down in Yugawara near Atami, and there's this NHK producer who also likes Akiya, and who's friends with a friend of mine, and he came down, and then we started talking about Akiya, and I was like, oh yeah, I've been digging around Chiba. He was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, me too. Where are you digging? And I was like, oh, you won't know where it is. It's the middle of nowhere. It's called Nagara. He was like, what? Why are you in Nagara too? Who are you talking to? And it turns out that we're both speaking with Yasujima-san at Nagara City Hall about Akiya. It's this completely random, like nobody knows Yasujima-san except this guy. And yet
Yeah.
miraculously we just bump into each other.
I would imagine it was kind of a small world of you Akiya hunters that you would kind of have the same contacts. But there's so many all over Japan. So yeah, that is kind of unusual and
Yeah,
fun.
I really have no idea what the scale of the issue is. I know in those clickbaity articles, frequently 8 million is the number that's thrown out. I have no idea how they arrived at that, and I certainly have a very good idea of how discombobulated the entire database is, right? So I'm pretty sure that there's no accurate way to kind of reasonably estimate just how big the issue is. I suspect it's very large, but eight
Yeah.
million, I don't know what that's
I've
based on.
I've heard other people say 13% of all houses are abandoned. I mean, there's
Okay.
you hear like yeah, numbers all over the place.
Yeah.
There must be multiple countings on different databases that,
Oh
are
yeah. It's really terrible. Like you'll find there's double counts all over, the double, triple, quadruple listings, right? It's a really nasty kind of landscape.
yeah. Do you ever have like government offices contact you guys and say,
Yeah.
we've got a big area of Akiya and we don't want to sell them? We just want
Mhm.
to get people to come in and rent them? Because I heard about these in Miyazaki and stuff that they just want people to come in and rent but not buy. And rent is basically free or something, but
So is that the EJU program?
maybe.
Yeah, there's the municipal governments are running a really toothless, if I'm being honest, campaign. Pretty much every municipal government has one. It's the EJU, I forget what it's called, but basically it's like, come on in and live in a kominka for super cheap and represent our community and make it look cool.
I
And
think that
they'll
sounds
pay.
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I didn't
viable
see
usually.
the appeal myself. Like, if you're gonna choose a community to go and live in, you would want to choose a community and an area and find a house that you wanted to rent or buy. I think that has more appeal, but maybe that's just for me.
The fact is it's government, and frequently they're not, quite tuned in to what sells. Especially like Inaka government is, again, like let's be honest, it's relatively stubborn, right? So a lot of those kind of the official offerings, I would say, frequently are a little tone deaf, and that's why they don't work because they're not appealing.
Right. Yeah. They're kind of desperate for ideas how to deal with them. So I'm sure places like that are very happy to find out about your services. We have about 7 more minutes. So what's the next step for you guys? What does next year look like for Akiya Inaka?
So two things. There's kind of the Inaka club sort of stuff and dealing with individuals and acclimatizing them to the idea of of living in Inaka and working with Aki and stuff like that. However, that's like if you're talking about money, individual sales aren't, where it's all at. And so we're actually speaking right now with a number of international investors about more corporate approaches, because the one thing I think probably the first thing that like clicked in my brain all of the years ago that when Akiya first came up was, oh wait a minute, that looks like a corporate campus, like a satellite campus. You could use Akiya to build business. And so there's already been any number of news stories. I'm pretty sure Fujitsu announced, and a number of other large corporates in Japan have already announced, that they're either creating satellite campuses or work from home, and all of these things. And well, it's not even a matter of they want to put their money where their mouth is. It's we've already got people putting that money into the mouth.
Wow.
People are
That's
acting on it.
that's
So
great.
next year we'll hopefully be facilitating a lot of the what do they call it now? Cohabitate, co-living. Sounds like, isn't that common law marriage? But yeah, the telework,
Yeah, yeah.
cohabitation, whatever.
If
Yeah,
you hear of
that's.
any businesses that want to invest in Hiroshima, there are some heritage warehouse buildings, which
Mm.
the government is looking for companies to kind of invest in so that they
Can
can
you
keep
send
them
me that
standing.
information? Can you
Yes,
send me information
because
about that?
if
Let's sell it.
companies, yes, because if companies are interested, they won't knock them down. But if
Exactly.
no companies want to invest in them, they're going to knock them down and build a shopping center. And they're beautiful red brick warehouses that have
Yeah,
so much
send that
heritage.
to me.
Yes,
Send that to me ASAP. I've got a meeting
I
tomorrow
will.
about
I
this.
will. Okay, we have a great question from Manderu. Are Akiya generally cheaper up north in Miyagi and Tohoku?
Yeah, I'm gonna say so. I actually don't have definitive information on that, so I'd have to look. I would expect so. Again, I was in Iwate, like that is back country. Yeah, property prices, and again, consider that too is frequently, like in your case as well. You're really buying the property most of the time. You're not actually buying the building. You're buying the land that it sits on, because there's this, uh, kind of shoddy craftsmanship and contemporary Japanese architecture. Um, so yeah, the land valuation is the thing that you're really going to want to look for. That'll account for
Yeah.
80 or 90% of what your spend is.
But even in Shiga, like I talked to Stuart Galbraith, and he bought an old Minka and remodeled it, and
Mm-hmm.
then he was doing a documentary about the gaijin in the Minka in that area, because a few international families had also bought Minka, and so he was making a film about that, and I talked to a few of them. Beautiful old house. I'm not sure why do they call it a Minka, different from a different kind. Is it because of the kuda that's next to it?
I don't
I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
know.
Anyway, they're beautiful old houses. He
Yeah.
basically bought it for nothing. Spent about
Mhm.
5 million remodeling it, making it comfortable, and then his taxes for the year are like 300 yen
Mhm.
for the tax. So that's another benefit of living in the Inaka, right? Your taxes for your house are usually, if you're in the city, quite high. But if
Yeah.
you buy a Inaka property, that's another big benefit, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. We have 2 more minutes. Anything else you'd like to talk about?
I have so much content that I need to, because I mean, it's Parker and I are a two-man team, right? And there's nobody else doing it. So like literally everything that you see, I've created all of it, right?
Yeah.
That's video editing, that's website development, that's databases, that's customer facing relationships and all of this stuff. So we're super busy right now, but I think one thing, and this too is sort of how the tsunami kind of worked for me as well, is sometimes a disaster comes and it sucks. In fact, most of the time it sucks. However, there can be like silver linings, like motivational silver linings and stuff. And so I've been interested in this stuff for a while. I do a lot of music stuff, video editing, all these things. But now is the time during coronavirus, right, for people, to rally together and do some really outrageous stuff. Because what coronavirus has proven more than anything to me is that what we had before isn't robust enough to deal with coronavirus. That's a broken system, right? And the only way to fix that is to experiment and go out there and try some wacky stuff that nobody's ever done before and see if it sticks, right? Because the fact is, if we continue conducting ourselves the way that we did prior to Corona, it's just going to continue and get worse from there. So, like, now is the time. I kind of think this is what we're doing. But yeah, I'd like to see more people uh, go out there and do some crazy things because
That's
I support it.
That's awesome and so important, right? Now is the time to take a risk, be innovative, and then after 6 months, reassess where you are, try to make adjustments, make it better. This is all very important for sustainability as well. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so
Exactly.
much for all you're doing. It's great.
Yeah.
I
Thanks.
look forward to reconnecting in 6 months' time and seeing all the development and everything's changed and how things have
Yep.
progressed. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It'll be good. Fingers crossed.
Awesome. Good, good.
Right.
You can join us tomorrow if you're following this series. 9 a.m. We're talking to comedian and talento Bobby Judo. So that should be a fun talk tomorrow at 9 in the morning. So join us for the last of the week. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your questions and comments. Have a great day. Bye.